These are memorial candles that I've recycled, collected, and reincorporated into my own work. They bring a kind of energy to the surface of the copper. I wouldn't have become the artist I am without Harlem. I came to Harlem to go to university in the late 80s. It was the era of crack, and so there was just a lot of blight and a lot of stories that weren't being told. I felt like everyday objects, those were the things that I needed to start the dialogue, start the story. The observer, the viewer, would be engaged because they knew the thing, but that I could take them somewhere because I was changing the context for it. And that contextual journey was really the practice for me. The so-called found object aesthetic has always been about the liminal space between the street and the buildings, the sidewalk. And seeing those things in that space is what activates my imagination for what I want, the story I want to tell about them. Every morning I'd get up quite early and walk around my neighborhood and I'd see a lot of alcohol bottles. It's early COVID, the bars are closed, the funeral homes are closed. But even in this moment of crisis, people were still claiming spaces to grieve collectively. And I started to correlate those bottles with street memorials and this idea of claiming space for devotion. I really wanted to figure out how that could not just be translated to just being about loss, but also being about hope. There's a chemical reaction to the copper. It happens while the candles are in place, and when it's dried, I remove the candles, and the sort of imprint and evidence of the candles is what's left. The trace of the candle starts to guide this dialogue with light. I'm articulating these rays of light in the form of the copper. It's not a glamorous process, but it is necessary. I first came across this Congolese cosmogram in Savannah, Georgia, at this church built by enslaved people. It was a way of them kind of hiding this ancestral symbol of rebirth and resistance in plain sight. You can also see the cosmogram laid out in my work. Still like the stepladders. They're candles and bottles, but they're all covered with landscape fabric. I like the moral aspect of this fabric because it's a fabric that landscaping industry uses to separate good soil from bad soil. The candles that I've collected that have been used in the process become the totem works. The cones are materials that we see a lot on the street. You see them when people are trying to claim some part of the landscape. They're covered with this tire thread, and it's really connected to this notion of movement. Taking those objects from the street environment and bringing it into the space of the galleries allow for the possibility of introspection. The space on the street is a space of devotion, and I was thinking about how introspection and devotion could be merged in some kind of choreographed discourse. The viewer comes into this labyrinth of sorts made out of the cone totems, and then they sort of navigate this space, hearing the sound of this gentleman guiding you through Harlem.
My name is Juan. I'm going to be your driving instructor. Now, when you're driving, you have to have a big picture. You have to look always far and away. You see over there? You have to look at the end of the road. Let's go.
In the entire exhibition, I was really thinking about both this notion of leading somebody on a journey, but also talking about how communities claim public space. I like this idea of a public announcement and its calligraphic nature. The shoelace, it's a vernacular material that's easily recognizable. I always feel like everybody knows how to tie a shoelace. What's important to me is this language that's from a particular historic moment. I've focused a lot on protest and civil rights era transformation. And a lot of the phrases are coming directly from album covers from these eras. I'll Take You There was a song by the Staple Singers. And it was really about taking you someplace hopeful and turning your back on the lies. I'm always looking at history that is overlooked, or moments where we think we've kind of left it and we're done with it, but it's even more relevant now. How do you bring these eras that are forgotten into a contemporary discourse? The street is the birthing of a lot of my creative journey in the past. The challenge was just architecturally making the object do the work. But here, the object has done the work, and it's now the evidence of the object that I'm intrigued with giving power to. I wanted to bring the randomness of the street into the order of the exhibition. It's important that there's that balance of structure and chaos. I need the flux and the unpredictability of the street and the sidewalk to keep the work alive and dynamic.